Imagine, just for a second, that you are trapped in an escalating, totally life-threatening disaster. Like you are standing in a narrow alleyway, and right in front of you is this 4-story high wall of roaring, suffocating fire,
That sounds terrifying.
right? Or picture yourself trapped in a dimly lit concrete stairwell, and a massive, vicious guard dog has somehow slipped its leash and is lunging straight at your throat.
Okay, my heart rate is already up.
Well, now imagine that you could stop that disaster absolutely in its tracks. Like you could bring those towering flames crashing down to the pavement, or send that charging animal flying backward against a wall using absolutely nothing but a silent mental focus and a specific hidden hand gesture.
Oh, wow. So no physical weapons at all.
None. No turning around to run, just a sudden, completely unexplainable command over the physical world around you.
I mean, you're basically describing a superpower. It sounds like, the climax of a fantasy novel or a comic book movie where human consciousness somehow just overrides the fundamental laws of physics and biology. It challenges every single thing we are taught about how reality functions.
It does. But we aren't looking at a comic book script today. We are looking at a modern, living worldview where deploying a secret hand seal to extinguish a raging fire is not considered a metaphor. Like, it is presented as a documented historical fact.
Which is just wild to think about.
Yeah. Today, we are cracking open the theology of Iquan Tao, guided by a deeply fascinating 2024 lecture from Susanna Lin.
Right.
The lecture is titled The Preciousness of the True Transmission, and our mission on this deep dive is to basically decode the architecture of this belief system. We're going to examine their claimed miracles, analyze their highly specific psychological tools, and really understand how this framework constructs a profound sense of cosmic order for the people who practice it.
And, to do that effectively, we need to establish our analytical framework right up front, like we always do.
Yes, very important.
We are not here to endorse these religious claims, nor are we here to debunk them, right? Whether a supernatural hand gesture can actually stop a fire is, well, it's completely outside the scope of our analysis.
Definitely. We're not taking sides here.
Exactly. Instead, we are treating this framework as a really brilliant case study in human meaning-making. We want to explore why these specific narratives resonate so powerfully with people and how this architecture attempts to solve incredibly universal human problems.
Things like uncontrollable anger or the daily grind of societal pressure.
Yeah, and ultimately, the absolute terror of death.
Right, because before you can convince someone they have a magical force field, you have to completely deconstruct how they view the universe, don't you?
Well, absolutely. You have to start right at the foundation.
So what exactly is the Tao in this context? And what does this tradition mean when it talks about returning to the one?
So it's a critical distinction, and the speaker makes a very deliberate point about this right at the beginning of her lecture. She says, Tao is not a religion.
Wait, not a religion?
Right. In this philosophical framework, religions are viewed as human institutions, like they're created to teach morality, whereas the Tao is presented as the underlying operational code of the universe itself.
Oh, interesting. So it's more like physics than theology in their eyes.
Exactly. And the one represents the original pure state of existence before duality entered the picture. Duality in this system is referred to as two.
Okay, the one and the two.
Yeah, and the core argument here is that the moment you have two, you have comparison. And the moment you have comparison, you have suffering.
Oh, man. That concept of duality is something anyone listening to this can totally relate to, especially today.
Oh, for sure.
The lecture argues that from the moment we are born into this physical world, this realm of the two, we are just shoved onto a treadmill of comparison. Like we look at who has better grades in school.
Or who is conventionally more attractive.
Right. We see who comes from a wealthy family with vast political power, and we immediately compare them to the person who is barely scraping by, having to borrow money just to keep the lights on.
It's exhausting.
It really is. And the framework argues that this exhausting, never-ending cycle of comparison is the absolute root of worldly suffering. It breeds bullying, arrogance, and oppression.
But interestingly, it also breeds a sense of righteous indignation, like where people try to fight against that inequality.
Wait, fighting inequality is also bad?
Well, that is the philosophical trap, right? The argument is that even when you are fighting for justice against inequality, you are still operating within the realm of the two.
Oh, because there's still a winner and a loser.
Exactly. You are still trapped in the binary of oppressor and oppressed. Which brings us to the overarching divine figure in this tradition, Lao Mu, or the Heavenly Mother.
Okay, the Heavenly Mother.
The theology dictates that despite all our earthly striving for status or wealth or even like righteous victory, the Heavenly Mother does not care about any of the metrics we use to measure success.
She doesn't care if you're the CEO or the janitor.
Right. She doesn't want your gold, your silver, or your social standing. The requirement for cosmic approval is shockingly simple, actually. She only wants your one piece of good heart.
Okay, but a good heart is an incredibly vague term. I mean, if you walk down the street and ask 100 random people if they have a good heart, 99 of them will say yes, right?
Yep, definitely. Everyone thinks they're the good guy.
So how does this framework actually define goodness?
Well, it strips away the superficial, kind of polite definition of goodness using a deeply uncomfortable reality check.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. The speaker asks her audience, she says, do you ever get angry?
Ouch. Yes.
Right. Do you ever look at a coworker or a family member and feel a sudden, sharp flash of irritation? Do you ever observe someone doing something you disagree with and feel a compulsive need to criticize them in your mind?
Wow, that hits really close to home because the moment you admit to feeling irritation, the framework essentially says, then your heart isn't actually pure. And the speaker uses a very heavy, visceral example to illustrate how easily a supposedly good heart is corrupted. She talks about the tragedy of domestic violence.
It is a really striking analytical pivot because the framework observes that people do not typically start families with the intention of committing violence, right?
Oh, of course not.
Two people come together because they look at each other and feel a profound sense of love. They find joy in each other's presence. But then, what is the mechanism that transmutes that genuine love into physical or emotional violence?
What changes?
The framework blames a psychological entity it calls the demon of temper. It argues that anger literally transforms a supposedly good person into a walking agent of destruction.
That's a powerful way to frame it. The demon of temper.
Yeah, and this uncontrollable temper is the manifestation of what the tradition calls the five aggregates, which you can think of as the accumulated karmic baggage, biases, and desires that just pollute our original pre-duality nature.
To explain how absolute and inescapable this original pure nature is supposed to be, the speaker uses an analogy that I found incredibly vivid. She compares the universal truth of the Tao to gravity.
Oh, right, the umbrella analogy.
Yes. Think about how fast the planet Earth is rotating right now. It is spinning at terrifying speeds. She likens it to a rainy day when you are holding a soaking wet umbrella.
Okay.
Before you walk inside your house, you spin that umbrella as fast as you can to flick the water droplets off, right?
Sure.
If the Earth is spinning exactly like that wet umbrella, why aren't all 8 billion of us being violently flung out into the vacuum of space?
Because of gravity.
Exactly. Gravity is this unseen, silent, completely unexplainable force that holds everything in its proper orbit without making a sound. The Tao is presented as the spiritual equivalent of that gravity.
It is a masterful way to make a highly abstract metaphysical concept feel tangible. But if we analyze this critically, we run into a severe practical roadblock.
What do you mean?
Well, if the ultimate goal of human existence is to return to the one, to completely reject the two, to stop comparing, to stop discriminating between good and bad or safe and dangerous, how does a person actually survive in society?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Duality seems biologically necessary. If you don't compare the speed of an oncoming car to your own walking speed, you can't cross the street safely.
Right, you'd get hit.
Exactly. If you don't discriminate between a trustworthy business partner and a total scam artist, you will be ruined. Doesn't this philosophy demand an impossible level of detachment?
That is exactly where my mind went. It sounds like a recipe for total paralysis.
Right.
Like if you abandon all comparison, you just become a passive victim to whatever happens around you.
But the framework actually anticipates that exact friction. The goal it sets forward is not to ignore physical reality or to become a passive, paralyzed observer.
Okay, so what is the goal?
The goal is to navigate the dualistic world while anchored to a pre-heavenly state of compassion. It is about engaging with the two without being spiritually corrupted by it.
How do you even do that?
Well, to prove that this pre-heavenly state already exists within you, the speaker offers a really brilliant thought experiment. Imagine you are walking down the street and you see a complete stranger suffer a sudden, humiliating accident.
Like they trip and drop all their groceries.
Yeah, exactly. Someone who has absolutely nothing to do with your life. If you rush over to help them, nobody is going to hand you $1 million.
Sure.
You aren't going to receive a medal. There is zero biological or economic incentive for you to care. And yet, you feel a sharp, involuntary pang of empathy. You feel a secret sorrow for their misfortune.
Right, it's just an instinct.
Exactly. And the tradition argues that this unexplainable, unprompted flash of empathy is the literal proof that the one is hiding inside your psychology. It refers to that empathy as your conscience.
But here is the tragedy of the human condition, according to the framework. For most people, that conscience is like a faulty, flickering light bulb.
A flickering light bulb, yeah.
It flashes on for a second when you see a sad commercial, and then it immediately burns out when someone cuts you off in traffic.
Yeah, so true.
The entire purpose of receiving the Tao, of being initiated into this tradition, is to take that flickering bulb and wire it to an infinite power source, to turn it into what they call a long, bright lamp, a permanent, unshakable state of illumination that dictates your every action.
So to answer your earlier question, navigating the physical world isn't the actual problem. The problem is navigating it in the dark.
Oh, I love that.
When you operate with that long, bright lamp of compassion, you can make necessary choices, like picking a career or crossing a street, without generating the toxic karma of anger, greed, or superiority.
Okay, so we've established the philosophy, we have this unseen gravity of compassion, and we have the concept of the long, bright lamp.
Right.
But, philosophical comfort isn't enough to override the primal biological terror of death.
Definitely not.
Every major spiritual tradition claims they have the absolute truth. If you are going to tell people that you alone hold the exclusive heavenly decree to save their souls, they are going to demand receipts.
They want proof.
Exactly, and this tradition doesn't just point to a warm spiritual feeling as proof, they point straight to the morgue.
This is such a crucial pivot in the belief architecture. Because a worldview cannot sustain absolute devotion purely on abstract morality, right? It needs empirical or at least phenomenological evidence.
So what is their evidence?
The tradition points to phenomena that flagrantly violate basic cellular biology as the ultimate validation of their exclusive mandate. Specifically, they focus entirely on the physical state of a practitioner's corpse after death.
Right, the specific phrase they use to describe this phenomenon is dongbuting siabu fucho. Translated, it means bodies don't freeze in winter, nor do they rot in summer.
Which is quite the claim.
It is. The central claim is that after an initiated member of this tradition passes away, their physical body simply refuses to undergo rigor mortis. It remains completely soft, the joints remain flexible, and the face sets into a lifelike, peaceful expression, completely regardless of the ambient temperature or the amount of time that has passed.
Which, if we look at it through the lens of pathology, is an extraordinary claim.
Scientifically impossible, really.
Right, because scientifically, once the heart stops pumping, cellular respiration ceases. Lactic acid builds up in the muscles, and within a few hours, the body begins to stiffen dramatically. Eventually, the breakdown of tissues produces the distinct odor of decay.
That's just what happens.
Yeah, and the framework actively acknowledges these scientific realities only to claim that their practitioners possess a spiritual override code that halts this biological decay. And the way they disseminate this belief, it isn't just through, dry doctrinal statements. It is communicated through highly localized, intensely emotionally charged storytelling.
I am so glad you brought up the storytelling because the narratives used to support this claim are intensely dramatic.
Very.
Take the story of the mother-in-law. We are introduced to a household utterly fractured by religious tension. There is a mother-in-law who harbors a deep, venomous resentment toward two things: vegetarians and members of Iquanto.
A very specific hatred.
Right. She actively blames the religion for some past unspoken grievance, but living under her roof are her son and daughter-in-law who are both deeply devoted practitioners.
Oh, wow. The tension must have been awful.
You can only imagine the suffocating psychological pressure inside that house. Every meal, every conversation would be a total minefield.
It sets up a classic, almost archetypal conflict between entrenched familial authority and spiritual conviction. But then biology forces a crisis.
Right.
The mother-in-law suffers a severe stroke. She loses her mobility, becomes completely bedridden, and requires around-the-clock total care.
Now, in many fractured families, this is the moment where the children might opt for a nursing home, or at least distance themselves.
Yeah, it's a huge burden.
But because the son and daughter-in-law are operating under the strict framework of filial piety, which is deeply woven into this tradition, they take on the burden. And it is a massive burden. They live an hour and a half away by car.
Oh, goodness.
Every single day, they endure a 3-hour round-trip commute just to clean her, feed her, and manage her bodily functions.
That is exhausting.
They do this relentlessly, demonstrating their belief through sheer, undeniable labor.
It is a demonstration of action over argument, which is incredibly persuasive.
Yeah.
As the mother-in-law's physiological condition inevitably deteriorates, the daughter-in-law realizes that time is running out.
Yeah.
She decides that the absolute most important duty she has is to help her mother-in-law receive the Tao before her consciousness fades. But think about this. How do you approach a woman whose entire identity has calcified around hating your specific religion and ask her to join it on her deathbed?
I mean, the way the daughter-in-law prepares for this confrontation is fascinatingly human. She doesn't just walk in blindly. She builds a massive mental dialogue tree.
Like mapping out an argument.
Exactly. She maps out every conceivable objection, insult, or argument the mother-in-law might throw at her. She practices her counter-arguments, building an impenetrable rhetorical defense. She walks into the sick room, terrified, clutching this mental script, and finally asks the impossible question. Mom, is it okay if you receive the Tao?
And this is where the narrative subverts all expectations to deliver its theological payload.
Yeah.
Because the mother-in-law does not argue.
She doesn't use any of the insults.
None. She does not deploy any of the attacks the daughter-in-law prepared for.
Hmm.
Stripped of her ego by illness and overwhelmed by the daily silent compassion of her caregivers, she simply exhales a single syllable. She just says,
Wow.
a sound of complete surrender and affirmation. All of that exhausting anxiety, all of that intellectual preparation is rendered entirely moot by a single moment of grace.
So they immediately initiate her. The family is so relieved that they actually spend a small fortune remodeling the entire ground floor of their house so the mother-in-law can move in and live her final days in comfort.
That's beautiful.
It is, but the universe has a different sense of timing. The very day before she is scheduled to move in, she passes away. The framework interprets this not as a tragedy, but as a final act of mercy from the mother-in-law, like passing quietly so she wouldn't be a further financial or physical burden on her devoted children. But here is where the story shifts from a touching family drama into an assertion of biological impossibility.
All right, here we go.
Because of a scheduling conflict with the local funeral parlor, the family couldn't hold the services immediately. Her body had to be placed into a commercial freezing morgue for an entire month.
A month.
30 full days on ice.
Let's contextualize that medically for a second. After 30 days in a sub-zero freezer, human soft tissue, which is mostly water, freezes solid. The body becomes essentially a block of ice.
Like a frozen steak.
Exactly. Rigor mortis is no longer the issue. It is a matter of thermal physics.
Right. But the framework demands that we reject that physics. The narrative claims that when the two brothers finally arrived at the morgue 30 days later to transfer her body into a casket, one lifting her by the shoulders, the other by the feet, her waist bowed.
Wait, it bent.
She bent in the middle. Her tissues were completely soft, yielding to gravity as if she were merely asleep.
That's wild.
The speaker uses this intensely specific, bizarre detail to hammer home the central premise. Dong Bo Ting, bodies don't freeze in winter.
And you know, a robust belief system never relies on a single data point. The speaker compounds this evidence with a second, violently contrasting narrative.
Oh, the man on the bicycle?
Yeah, she introduces an 88-year-old man from the Badu district. He wasn't a high-ranking master or a spiritual elite. He was just an ordinary, everyday practitioner who had spent 18 years quietly cultivating his character and telling his neighbors about the value of the Tao.
And his story involves a terrifying kinetic trauma.
It does. This elderly man is riding his bicycle on a busy road. He makes an illegal, ill-timed left turn directly into the path of a massive 10-wheel military transport truck.
Oh, God.
It was a catastrophic collision of metal and flesh. But according to the tradition, when the dust clears, the metal bumper of this heavy military truck is visibly dented inward.
The truck is dented.
The truck is dented, while the 88-year-old man stands up from the asphalt without a single broken bone or scratch.
That is insane.
The framework insists that unseen divine beings deployed a literal localized force field, a divine armor around his body. The truck collided with the physics of the unseen world, not his frail human skeleton.
And notice how the narrative seamlessly links his physical invulnerability during life to his biological state after death.
Right.
When this same man eventually passed away years later, the framework claims his body naturally settled into a full cross-legged lotus position.
Wow.
And it remained sitting upright for 4 days and 5 nights. No stiffening, no decay, no slumping over. It became a huge spectacle, drawing crowds of practitioners from neighboring temples to witness this architectural proof of their faith.
So, putting on our analytical hats for a minute, how do these stories function for the listener and the audience? Why does the tradition focus so heavily on the grotesque realities of morgues and car crashes?
Why do I need the gory detail?
Exactly. Because they provide what we can call narrative armor.
Narrative armor. I like that.
If you are a skeptic listening right now, you might be scoffing at the idea of a 30-day unfrozen corpse or a magical force field denting a truck. But for the practitioner existing inside this worldview, whether they interpret these stories as literal, documented history or as profound metaphorical parables, the psychological utility is identical.
It works the same either way.
It does. These narratives offer the ultimate, unshakable comfort that the cold, indifferent laws of physics, the terrifying decay of human biology, and the finality of death itself are not absolute. They can be hacked.
They can be transcended through devotion.
Yes. It whispers to the deepest part of the human psyche, you are safe, the world is dangerous, and your body will eventually fail, but your true essence is protected by a gravity far stronger than nature.
It is the ultimate trump card against existential dread. But if the physical laws of biology and momentum are allegedly being overridden, it begs the obvious question, what is the mechanism?
Right, how is it actually happening?
Yeah. What is happening behind the curtain in the unseen dimensions to generate this kind of reality-bending power?
To answer that, the worldview pulls back the veil on its own rituals. To an outside observer, an initiation ceremony or a Dharma assembly in this tradition looks remarkably mundane. It's usually just people sitting quietly in a room listening to a lecture.
Like folding chairs and a whiteboard.
Exactly. But the framework insists that a massive, multidimensional operation is taking place simultaneously.
The speaker highlights this contrast with a story about a spirit medium flying in an airplane over Taiwan. The medium looks down through the clouds and sees a tiny, unadorned, incredibly plain house emitting a pillar of blinding, brilliant light that shoots into the sky.
Like a lighthouse.
Yeah. The medium is confused, asking why a random living room is glowing like a lighthouse. The spiritual answer given is that inside that plain house, Jigong, the living Buddha, is actively transmitting the Tao. What looks like folding chairs and a whiteboard to us is, in the unseen realm, an epicenter of cosmic energy.
But the most visceral, almost disturbing exploration of this unseen realm comes from a highly specific anecdote about an Indonesian artist.
Oh, the painter. This story is incredible.
It really is. According to the framework, this artist possessed a yin-yang eye, an innate psychic ability allowing him to perceive the spiritual dimension layered over our physical reality.
So he can see ghosts.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
He attended a standard Dharma assembly, and because he was a painter, he went home and translated exactly what his yin-yang eye perceived onto a massive canvas.
And the details of this painting, as described in the narrative, are absolutely staggering. He didn't just paint the physical attendees sitting and listening. He painted the layers of invisible entities packed into the room.
Layer upon layer.
First, he saw the deceased ancestors of the people in the audience. They were kneeling respectfully on the floor, permitted to absorb the divine teachings solely because their living descendants had generated the merit to bring them there.
But it wasn't just a peaceful gathering of benevolent ghosts, was it? The artist also painted a terrifying crowd of angry, aggressive spirits hovering at the edges of the room, pointing furiously at the human attendees.
Pointing at them.
Yes. In this theology, these are known as karmic creditors. These are the souls of people or animals who were cheated, murdered, or wronged by the attendees in previous incarnations.
Past lives.
Right. They are vibrating with rage because their debtors, the people in the audience, are sitting comfortably in the light of divine wisdom, on the verge of escaping the cycle of reincarnation, while the creditors are still trapped in the dark, suffering the consequences of the past. They are demanding their cosmic pound of flesh.
That is so intense. But out of everything in this painting, the detail that truly made me stop and reread the transcript was the behavior of the highest divine figures.
Yeah, this is the most shocking part.
The artist painted Jigong and Yu Bodhisattva, the supreme spiritual teachers overseeing the current era. Where were they in this chaotic scene?
You'd expect them to be on a throne, right?
Right. Were they floating on golden clouds, throwing lightning bolts to banish the angry spirits? Were they sitting on thrones, passing judgment? No. The framework claims that these towering divine figures had abandoned their lotus seats. They were physically kneeling on the ground in front of the raging karmic creditors, bowing their heads and begging for forgiveness on behalf of their oblivious human disciples sitting in the folding chairs.
That image is a piece of breathtakingly radical theology. If you survey traditional top-down religious hierarchies across the globe, whether it's Zeus on Olympus or a king-like deity on a heavenly throne, divine figures are almost universally depicted in postures of absolute, unyielding authority.
They don't kneel.
They demand submission. They render harsh judgment. But this framework profoundly subverts the entire concept of divine power. Here, the highest spiritual authorities willingly strip themselves of their status. They humiliate themselves, getting down into the dirt to absorb the toxic debt generated by human ignorance.
I want you, the listener, to imagine the psychological weight of that for a second. It is like a prominent, wealthy parent walking into a crowded police station, getting down on their hands and knees and weeping, begging the victim of their child's crime for mercy, while the child just sits there totally oblivious.
It's emotionally devastating.
The emotional leverage that creates is staggering.
It is an engineered psychological masterstroke because it bypasses fear of punishment and goes straight for an incredibly deep well of guilt, indebtedness, and gratitude.
Right.
If you truly believe that a cosmic Buddha is literally kneeling in the spiritual mud because you lost your temper at a waiter yesterday, the motivation to change your behavior is no longer about avoiding hell. It is about not humiliating the divine parent who is vouching for your life.
You aren't just letting yourself down when you fail. You are actively degrading the beings trying to save you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the framework insists that this extreme spiritual intervention is necessary to perform a very specific ancient operation. The speaker actually ties their ritual directly to the Christian Bible, specifically quoting John the Baptist.
Wait, really? John the Baptist?
Yes. She references the verse where John says, "I baptize you with water, but he who is coming after me will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and fire."
That is a bold syncretic move. In traditional Christian theology, that baptism of fire is almost universally interpreted metaphorically, representing purification, or historically as the descent of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost.
Right.
But this tradition rips that verse out of its Christian context and claims it is a literal, predictive prophecy regarding their specific modern ritual.
Yes. The framework asserts that John the Baptist was actually prophesying the work of Qigong. During the initiation ceremony, the master takes a stick of incense and draws a physical, literal flame from the central mother lamp on the altar. They guide that flame directly to the space between the initiate's eyes, opening a spiritual gateway they call the mystic portal. The tradition claims that this passing flame is the exact baptism of fire prophesied in the Bible, and that in the millisecond the heat touches the skin, the fire incinerates 60,000 years of accumulated karmic dust.
Let's unpack that specific number, because 60,000 years isn't random.
No, it's very deliberate.
In Chinese cosmological thinking, it represents a vast, almost incomprehensible epoch of time, dozens, maybe hundreds of past lives, all layered with mistakes, debts, and unresolved anger. The framework is promising that a single precise ritualistic action can sever the root of tens of thousands of years of consequence, allowing the soul to finally escape the gravitational pull of reincarnation.
And to emphasize just how critical they believe this physical flame is, the speaker shares a harrowing story from the absolute peak of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Oh, the Cambodia story.
Yeah. It is October 2020. There are no vaccines available. Global borders are slamming shut. Entire cities are locked inside their homes in terror. But in Cambodia, there's a small group of practitioners who are desperate to hold a Dharma assembly.
But they can't do it themselves, right?
Exactly. The problem is they don't have a transmitter, a high-level master authorized to wield the flame and open the mystic portal. A transmitter in Taiwan hears about this. He knows that traveling means risking severe illness, quarantine, or even death.
Especially before the vaccines.
Right. Yet, he decides he cannot abandon them to the karmic wheel. He pays triple the normal price for a flight and flies into the heart of the pandemic in Phnom Penh.
The narrative introduces a fascinating concept here. The two legs of a vow. The transmitter isn't just walking on flesh and bone. His first leg is the vow to prioritize the spiritual over the physical, to value the soul's escape over bodily safety.
And a second leg.
His second leg is the vow of relentless effort and financial sacrifice. By striding forward on these two metaphysical legs, he makes the impossible journey.
And the tradition claims that the universe responded to this extreme sacrifice with a physical manifestation.
The photo.
Yes, during the ceremony in Cambodia, someone snapped a photograph of the altar just as the flame flared up. When they reviewed the image, the framework claims that the distinct, recognizable face of Qigong was clearly visible manifesting inside the fire.
inside the actual flame.
Right. The speaker presents this not as an optical illusion or pareidolia, but as absolute objective validation. It is proof that the divine was present, that the risk was worth it, and that the baptism of fire is a tangible reality.
But this introduces a massive, unavoidable logical friction. If this specific baptism of fire is the singular, ultimate mechanism for escaping 60,000 years of suffering, why is it only happening now?
Right.
Why were billions of humans born and died throughout ancient history without access to this ritual? And more provocatively, why does this specific modern group claim to hold the exclusive monopoly on it?
Well, this pushes the deep dive into the framework's grandest architecture, the concept of the cosmic clock.
Right. To justify their exclusivity, the tradition constructs a massive, sweeping timeline of human existence. It claims there's an unbroken lineage of 64 generations of Tao transmitters, stretching all the way back to the earliest mythological emperors of China, through Laozi and Confucius.
It's a huge lineage.
But it doesn't view time as a steady stream. It chops history into distinct, highly regulated epochs. The framework explicitly mentions the Red Sun era, which it identifies as the historical period when titans like Jesus Christ and Gautama Buddha walked the earth.
Okay.
But then, the speaker makes a statement that is breathtaking in its audacity. The Red Sun era is over. It is completely, officially closed.
It is a stunning theological maneuver. The framework essentially argues that the divine missions of Jesus and Buddha have reached their expiration date.
Expiration dates?
Yeah, they managed the previous epoch, but the cosmic seasons have changed. We are now living in the White Sun era, an epoch overseen by Maitreya Buddha and practically administered by Qigong.
Okay, I have to stop and push back on this, because the implications are staggering. The framework is essentially looking at billions of practicing Christians and Buddhists alive today and telling them your religion is outdated software.
That's a great way to put it, outdated software.
It claims that the key to heaven they are praying to doesn't fit the lock anymore. That is an incredibly aggressive, highly controversial stance. How do they justify completely overriding thousands of years of established theology?
Well, if we use your software analogy, it clarifies their logic perfectly. The framework isn't claiming that the software of Jesus or Buddha was a virus, or that it was inherently bad.
Oh, they still respect them.
In fact, it openly praises their sacrifices.
Yeah.
The lecture states that their teachings are still excellent for comforting human hearts and establishing basic societal morality. But, and this is the critical distinction, they argue that the operating system of the universe has been upgraded.
So it just doesn't work for the main goal anymore.
Right. The old software no longer receives security updates from heaven. It can teach you how to be a nice person, but it no longer contains the executable code required to halt reincarnation. The divine mandate, the literal operational key to heaven, is a moving target that shifts according to the cosmic clock. And the tradition claims that right now, that mandate rests exclusively in their hands.
The speaker even uses a highly specific, provocative anecdote about a Catholic priest to solidify this claim.
Oh, yes, the Fujian University story.
Right. She talks about an Iquan Tao practitioner who was studying at Fujian University, which is a very prominent Catholic institution in Taiwan. This student allegedly corners a Catholic priest and references the biblical verse where Jesus hands St. Peter the keys to the kingdom of heaven.
A classic verse.
Yes. The student asks the priest point blank, where are those keys right now? And according to the lecture, the Catholic priest lowers his head and admits St. Peter lost the keys to heaven.
Wow.
Now, whether that conversation actually happened verbatim, or whether it is an apocryphal story polished over years of retelling, its function within the lecture is precise and undeniable.
It's deployed to establish absolute exclusivity.
Exactly. The speaker uses this concept of the lost keys to issue a severe warning to her audience. She urges followers that once they have received the active Tao, they must not dilute it by mixing practices. She warns them against seeking baptism in a Christian church or taking refuge in a traditional Buddhist temple just to cover their bases.
Don't hedge your bets.
Right. The framework argues that doing so demonstrates a fatal lack of faith. It tangles your spiritual lifelines. If you hold the current active passcode to the universe, why would you go digging through the trash for an expired one?
So, assuming the practitioner fully buys into this exclusivity, assuming they believe they are holding the only active key in the universe, what does that actually look like on a Tuesday afternoon?
What's the practical application?
It's exactly. The framework claims that during initiation, practitioners are handed 3 highly specific, deployable tools, known collectively as the 3 treasures. And the text makes it clear that these aren't just lovely philosophical ideas to ponder while meditating. They are presented as tactical gear for surviving high-stress, real-world emergencies.
Tactical gear. That is such an interesting way to look at it.
It really is. Let's break down the mechanics of how these tools supposedly function when the physical world attacks you. The third treasure is the hand seal we mentioned in the very beginning, known as the i贯.
The physical mechanics of this gesture are deeply symbolic. The hands overlay each other in a very specific way, tucking the thumbs inside to mimic the exact posture of holding an infant against your chest.
Like cradling a baby.
Right. The framework explains that the fingers represent the astrological signs of Zi and Hai, which are the very first and very last signs of the Chinese zodiac system. By clasping them together, you are creating a closed, energetic loop connecting the alpha and the omega. But more importantly, you are physically embodying the innocence of a newborn child. By holding this seal, you are attempting to instantly bypass your adult ego and return to that pure, pre-heavenly state of the One.
And the lecture doesn't just explain the symbolism, it provides a terrifying, kinetic anecdote of this hand seal overriding physics. The speaker recounts a mundane evening that suddenly turns lethal. A neighbor's motorcycle, parked in a tightly packed alleyway, spontaneously catches fire.
This is the fire from our introduction.
Yes.
You have to picture this alley. It is crammed with scooters leaking oil and gas. One ignites, and within seconds, a chain reaction sends a wall of flames shooting 4 stories into the air. The heat is melting the paint off the buildings.
An inferno.
The neighbors are in a state of absolute screaming panic. They are throwing buckets of water, slipping on the wet pavement, achieving nothing. And to make matters worse, the alley is too narrow. The fire trucks are stuck at the main road and cannot get in.
So they're trapped.
Totally trapped. It is a scenario where physical intervention has completely failed. So the speaker, standing in the chaos with her young niece, realizes that running is pointless. They stand completely still, and they deploy the third treasure. They form the hand seal of the infant.
And what happens?
The speaker claims that the exact second their hands locked into the seal, a loud, inexplicable rushing sound ripped through the alley, a massive shua sound. And instantly, the 4-story tower of fire collapsed. It dropped directly to the pavement and extinguished before the fire trucks ever laid a single hose.
In the architecture of this belief system, the hand seal is not a prayer asking for help. It's presented as a command code. It is an instant, localized override of thermodynamics.
It's like pressing a mute button on the fire.
Exactly. But it is not the only weapon in their arsenal. The second treasure is a 5-word mantra, a silent internal chant that invokes the spiritual authority of the era. And the framework provides an equally violent narrative to demonstrate its efficacy.
The stairwell dog attack. The speaker describes her sister returning home late at night to her apartment building. She walks into the enclosed concrete stairwell and realizes a neighbor has carelessly left a massive, highly aggressive guard dog off its leash.
Nightmare scenario.
Absolute nightmare. The dog locks eyes with her. It bares its teeth, blocks her path, and lowers its center of gravity to lunge directly at her throat. She is trapped in a confined space. She is carrying groceries, so her hands are full. She physically cannot deploy the hand seal.
So she has to use the mantra.
She shifts to her mental arsenal. She begins to silently, frantically chant the 5-word mantra in her mind.
And the framework is highly specific about the timing of the supernatural intervention here. It notes that she didn't even have time to finish the sentence.
Right. The text emphasizes that she only hit the 3rd syllable of the mantra in her mind when the environment violently reacted. She hears that exact same rushing shua sound.
The same sound as the fire.
Yes. Suddenly, the charging guard dog is struck mid-air by an unseen kinetic force. The massive animal is thrown backwards, slamming hard against the concrete wall. It drops to the floor, terrified, and cowers in the corner, allowing the sister to walk past completely unharmed.
Again, the framework refuses to frame this as the dog simply getting distracted or losing its footing. It is presented as a physical, concussive defense mechanism triggered entirely by a silent mental chant.
It's invisible armor.
It is. However, the framework is incredibly careful to install a safety valve here. It anticipates that people might just memorize these tools and live recklessly.
Like using it as a magic trail.
Right. The speaker explicitly warns that these miraculous interventions are not guaranteed simply because you know the secret passwords. She uses a great phrase, warning that you cannot just hug the Buddha's leg at the last minute.
That's a great idiom.
Yeah. These tools supposedly manifest kinetic power in emergencies only because the practitioner has spent months or years quietly building up the spiritual voltage required to power them. And the primary way you build that voltage brings us to the first treasure, the mystic portal.
The mystic portal, as we discussed, is the specific spot on the forehead opened by the baptism of fire. While the hand seal and the mantra are deployed outwardly to fight off literal fires and attacking dogs, the mystic portal is deployed inwardly.
It's an internal tool.
Yes. It is used to fight the demon of temper. It is the ultimate tool for emotional regulation.
And the lecture takes a fascinating detour here to address modern psychology and the crushing exhaustion of contemporary life. It specifically takes aim at a massive internet culture movement known as tangping, or lying flat.
Oh, I've read about this.
It's a viral movement where young people, overwhelmed by impossible housing prices, toxic work cultures, and societal pressure, decide to simply give up. They do the absolute bare minimum to survive, emotionally detach from their ambitions, and essentially lie flat while the world passes them by.
And the framework brutally critiques this approach. It argues that the lying flat movement is a false liberation. Letting go of your anger doesn't mean collapsing into bed and giving up.
Right, that's just apathy.
Exactly. That is just physical and emotional laziness, and it still generates a form of stagnant, negative karma. True letting go is an intense, active mental discipline.
Active discipline.
Yes. The speaker advises that when you are thrust into a confrontational situation, when a coworker insults you, when your spouse yells at you, or when a driver cuts you off, your biological instinct is to let the blood rush to your head and explode. But you also shouldn't just swallow the abuse and let it rot inside you.
So what's the alternative?
Instead, you are supposed to take all of your conscious attention and forcefully retract it from the external trigger, pulling your mind entirely into the physical point of the mystic portal.
If we modernize the terminology, the first treasure acts exactly like a mental panic room.
A mental panic room. I love that.
When the outside environment becomes chaotic, toxic, and threatening, you do not engage in a fistfight with the chaos, nor do you surrender and let the chaos trample you. You pull your consciousness inward. You lock the heavy steel door of the portal behind you. You sit in the absolute silent safety of the one while the emotional storm of the two rages outside.
I think that is an incredibly powerful psychological technique, regardless of what you believe spiritually. You retreat into the mental panic room, you allow the physiological spike of adrenaline to pass, and only then do you step back out.
It resets your nervous system.
Exactly. The text specifically says this allows you to open your heart and speak clearly. You can communicate your boundaries calmly and effectively instead of screaming and escalating the conflict. It is a highly aggressive, active form of disengagement.
And we have to understand that within this framework, mastering this emotional regulation isn't just about being a polite person or lowering your blood pressure.
It's in much higher stakes.
Controlling your temper is framed as a matter of multidimensional life and death. The hand seal might save your physical body from a dog attack, but how you handle your road rage determines the ultimate fate of your soul.
Wow.
This leads directly into the tradition's profound mechanical explanation of how fate and karma actually operate.
Yes, the mechanics of fate. The speaker uses an agricultural analogy to explain karma that completely demystified the concept for me.
The seeds.
The seeds. She says, I want you to imagine a seed. That seed represents a piece of past karma, perhaps a terrible, selfish act you committed 3 lifetimes ago. Now, if you take a seed and just leave it sitting in a dry glass jar on a shelf, does it spontaneously turn into a tree?
No, it does nothing.
No, it just sits there completely inert.
Exactly. The framework observes that for a seed to manifest its potential, for a piece of ancient, dormant karma to erupt into a real-world disaster, a terminal illness, or a financial ruin, it absolutely requires an environment of specific conditions. A seed needs soil, it needs water, and it needs sunlight. Without the conditions, the origin is powerless.
And the lecture maps these agricultural conditions directly to our daily psychological states. The water and sunlight that feed the dormant seeds of bad karma are our own daily habits of greed, anger, and ignorance.
So we are watering our own bad luck.
Exactly. If you walk around constantly seething with resentment, if you complain about every little inconvenience, if you are perpetually jealous of what others have, the framework says you're essentially carrying around a watering can filled with high-grade fertilizer, pouring it over all the toxic seeds you planted in past lives. You are actively guaranteeing that those seeds will sprout into actual localized suffering in your current life.
Conversely, if you have accumulated seeds of good karma from past lives, they aren't going to magically sprout into good fortune unless you provide the necessary conditions of compassion, joy, and selfless giving.
It makes sense.
It creates an incredibly empowering, proactive theological stance. It completely reframes the concept of destiny. It dictates that bad karma is not a death sentence. It is not an inescapable, predetermined doom written in the stars.
Right. Because you control the weather. You can literally starve your bad karma to death.
Starve the seeds.
Yes. If you use the mental panic room of the mystic portal to control your temper and stop yourself from lashing out, you are physically cutting off the water supply to the bad seeds. The seeds of disaster might still exist in the soil of your soul, but because you refuse to water them with anger, they cannot germinate. You are actively, aggressively managing your fate through the mechanism of emotional regulation.
To formalize this massive responsibility, the lecture shifts analogies from agriculture to economics. It introduces the concept of the karmic bank account.
Oh, this part is brilliant.
In the spiritual economy of the universe, merit is the ultimate universally accepted currency.
And the accounting system is brutally strict. Doing good deeds, volunteering at the temple, donating money to the poor, these are all treated as deposits into your account. But what constitutes a withdrawal?
It's not what you'd expect.
Right. It isn't just committing murder or stealing. The primary drain on your spiritual finances is your temper. The text quotes a terrifying proverb to illustrate this. One spark of anger burns down the whole forest of merit.
Think about that. One spark.
The framework warns that the very second you lose your temper and scream at someone, you are executing a massive, unauthorized withdrawal from your spiritual bank account. You can spend 10 years building a forest of merit through volunteering and burn it all to ash with a 10-second screaming match in a parking lot.
To help practitioners navigate this volatile economy, the framework provides an investment strategy. It introduces the concept of yin-day, which translates to hidden virtue.
Hidden virtue.
It outlines a simple transaction.
Yeah.
If you perform a noble charitable deed and then you immediately brag about it to your friends or you post a picture of it on social media, you receive your compensation in the form of human-like praise.
You got your reward.
Right. The transaction clears, the account is settled, and zero spiritual merit is generated. But if you perform a vital act of charity entirely in secret, ensuring that absolutely no human being ever knows what you did, that deposit bypasses the physical world completely. It goes directly into the cosmic bank account, where it accumulates massive, compounding spiritual interest.
Okay, so let's look at the ultimate endgame here. You are utilizing the hand seals, you are starving your bad seeds by controlling your anger, you are secretly doing good deeds in the shadows, and you are hoarding this vast fortune of cosmic merit in your bank account.
You're doing everything right.
What is all this currency actually buying you? Where does this framework ultimately lead?
Well, the deep dive culminates here, in the final impending cosmic exam. The lecture describes a monumental future event called the Dragonflower Assembly.
And this detail genuinely shocked me. The framework insists that this ultimate assembly is not going to take place in some ethereal, cloudy heaven in another dimension. It is going to take place right here, on the physical dirt of planet Earth.
It is framed as the ultimate sorting mechanism for the White Sun era. The lecture claims that during this planetary assembly, a final, rigorous cosmic exam will be administered to select exactly 38,600 saints and 48,000 sages from among the entirety of the human race.
Just over 50,000 people. That's a tiny number.
It is.
And the speaker goes out of her way to democratize this terrifying exam. She emphasizes that these 51,600 elite cosmic positions are not reserved for the founders of the religion or the high-ranking masters who run the massive temples.
It's not a VIP club.
Right. The playing field is entirely level. A simple, unnoticed volunteer who quietly chops vegetables in the temple kitchen, who successfully controls their temper, and who quietly builds a fortune of hidden virtue has the exact same mathematical chance of claiming one of those 48,000 lotus seats as a famous, high-level transmitter who travels the globe. The cosmos only measures the bank account of your heart.
But the motivation to pass this exam, the drive to accumulate this spiritual wealth, extends far, far beyond personal ambition or the desire to be a cosmic sage. The most emotionally devastating and resonant part of this entire belief architecture is the assertion that you are never just cultivating for yourself.
It's not an individual sport.
Exactly. In this framework, your spiritual bank account is linked directly to your ancestors.
This is where the profound cultural weight of filial piety anchors the abstract theology into human reality. The tradition claims that the moment you receive the Tao, the moment that flame touches your forehead, your ancestors in the spirit world immediately feel the effects.
They get an instant upgrade.
Yeah. As you cultivate your merit on Earth, your deceased relatives receive a corresponding white lotus in the afterlife, which physically elevates their status and alleviates their suffering in the unseen realm.
To ground this massive, multidimensional claim, the speaker ends with a story from a 2023 mission trip to Sri Lanka. It is an anecdote designed to elicit absolute awe and a terrifying sense of responsibility.
The narrative sets the scene at a newly established temple in Sri Lanka. A local family is attending an initiation ceremony. Suddenly, a 19-year-old girl in the audience collapses.
Just out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. The framework claims her body is violently possessed by a spirit. She drops to the hard floor and begins frantically, physically kowtowing, throwing her forehead against the ground over and over again in a desperate gesture of total submission and overwhelming gratitude.
Which would be terrifying to witness.
Right. When the intense spiritual energy finally recedes and the girl regains control, she reveals the identity of the entity. It was her grandfather, a man who had been dead for 20 years.
According to the architecture of the belief, the grandfather's soul, languishing in the spiritual realm for 2 decades, had been granted a temporary pass to possess his granddaughter for one specific reason: to say thank you.
Just to say thank you.
Yes, he possessed her body to physically throw himself at the feet of the masters, because he intimately understood that the family's decision to receive the Tao that day was actively pulling him out of the darkness of the afterlife.
I want you, the listener, to stop and really imagine the crushing, magnificent pressure that a story like this places on a practitioner's shoulders. You aren't just meditating in your living room to lower your blood pressure or clear your head.
No, it's so much more than that.
In this worldview, you are the load-bearing pillar for your entire family tree. You are carrying the eternal fate of your ancestors, your parents, and your unborn descendants squarely on your back.
Every single action matters.
Every single time you let the demon of temper win, every time you scream at a stranger in traffic, you aren't just giving yourself a headache. You are actively bankrupting your deceased grandfather. You are plunging him back into the dark.
That is a terrifying thought.
And conversely, every time you swallow your pride, every time you retreat into the panic room of the mystic portal and show compassion, you are actively lifting your ancestors toward the light.
It constructs a framework of absolute, inescapable interconnectedness. The individual ego is obliterated. You are never truly isolated. Every single microfluctuation of your internal emotional state sends massive, multi-generational ripples across the cosmic timeline.
Which brings our deep dive full circle. We've traced the architecture of this worldview from the abstract, silent philosophy of the One, straight through the startling physical anomalies of bodies defying the freezer.
Unfrozen bodies, dented trucks.
We've examined the invisible, subversive battles of Buddhas kneeling in the dirt, the audacious expiration dates of the cosmic epochs, the tactical, kinetic deployment of the 3 treasures, and the ruthless, high-stakes accounting of the karmic bank.
And as we close the book on Susanna Lynn's lecture, the value of unpacking a text like this becomes incredibly clear. Even if you, the listener, remain a staunch materialist, even if you completely reject the idea of ancestral possession, supernatural force fields, or a 60,000-year baptism of fire, the psychological scaffolding this tradition has engineered is undeniably potent.
It really is.
The mere idea of reframing your daily petty anger, not as a harmless habit, but as a literal catastrophic withdrawal from the total value of your life.
Right.
That is a concept that forces you to change how you interact with the world.
For sure.
Visualizing your consciousness, retracting into an impenetrable, silent panic room when the world tries to trigger you, is a tactical tool any modern person could deploy to survive the exhausting chaos of a Tuesday afternoon. It is a masterclass in how human belief fundamentally alters human behavior.
It truly is.
Huh?
Which leaves us with one final, lingering question to turn over in your mind long after this audio stops.
What's the thought?
If we dare to step inside this worldview for just 1 minute, if we pretend that our private, unseen actions, our secret, uncelebrated generosities, and our fleeting petty tempers are silently funding or bankrupting the spiritual trust funds of the people who died before us and the people who will be born after us, how would that instantly change the way you behave right now in the moments when you think nobody is watching?
Would you act differently?
Are any of us ever truly acting just for ourselves? Or are we all, in our own way, standing in front of a roaring fire, holding the fate of everything we love entirely in the silent focus of our minds?